So we just arrived to our undisclosed location. I have no idea what we're even going to be able to show off, but whatever it is, I'm excited to see it. So let's go. I grew up such a fan of sports memorabilia and sports cards, and I'm really excited that this show is both going to highlight that as well as the awesome entrepreneurs that make it all possible. Let's do it. Welcome back into Talking Shop in partnership with the Coffee Breakers. Today we're here for a very special episode with Lucas and John Reznikoff at University Archives. So, guys, I'm so excited for a bunch of reasons. A, just because I respect what you guys are doing so much, and you have some of the most unique stuff. I bought stuff from you guys before, and you have a bunch of stuff here to show off. So I think without any further ado, we should just dive into that, since that's what everybody wants to see.
Absolutely. So the first item I'm going to show you, I hate it in the slabs when they're crooked, is this George Patton. And this is a clip signature from an envelope, and this comes directly from the Patton family. I've been the agent for the Patton family for his grandson for about 30 years.
Whoa.
The Patton family is really interesting because I don't know if you ever saw Forrest Gump, but you know when you see Lieutenant Dan that everybody in his family died in a war. That's the case with the Patton family too. Like all the way back to the Revolutionary War, they had soldiers, and of course the famous general died in World War II. This is Jefferson Davis, and it's a signed photo.
So what's the difference between something like that and a parlor card, which people might be familiar with?
Yeah, so these are called cartes de visite. So this is the photos of the time during the Civil War. You could go in to a studio, and in fact, important about this is the studio. So this is a Vanderson and Jones, which was a very, very famous studio in the heart of the Confederacy in Richmond, Virginia. And to see something, that's 150 years old, do the math really quick, 1865, 160 years almost, that's in this kind of condition is, you just never see it. And again, it's a gem mint 10. What I've noticed is people who collect basketball and baseball cards, they love CDVs because it's got that kind of feel.
So for somebody who's a controversial figure like that, how do those hold up and have collector markets?
Yeah, so that's really interesting that you say that, and you put your finger right on the point of this, is that the Confederates, the statues are coming down everywhere.
Right.
And so I think the Confederate market is a little weaker than it has been in the past. However, the very famous philosopher Dos Passos said, "Those who know not of history are doomed to repeat it." This is history. The good, the bad, the ugly. We need to know our history, and we need to preserve it. And this is a signed check of the same guy, Jefferson Davis. But we also have Jack London. I think everybody read Call of the Wild in high school. Lucas, did you read that?
Wasn't a part of my high school reading, but
Not even the Monarch Notes?
It didn't slide into the curriculum, I guess.
One of the other things that we do is a lot with photography, and photography's been really hot. This is not a type 1 photo, it's a type 3.
What's the difference between a type 1 and a type 3 for people who don't know?
So type 1 is generated at the time of the event.
Right.
So if this were generated in 1963, and they could tell that by the paper, by the image, by a number of things, it would be much more valuable than a print that was done later to commemorate or to talk about the event later on. And these are very desirable. Anything surrounding Kennedy is desirable. On that subject, Lucas, who's that guy?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right, and that guy?
It's Jack Ruby.
So this is the killer of the killer. Jack Ruby famously went and shot Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. Or was he his assassin? And there's been conspiracy theorists.
Books written about it, right?
Tons of books. Now, my feeling is that Oswald absolutely did it. He acted alone. There was no conspiracy.
Right.
However, I will tell you, the conspiracy is great for business because people are really interested. It's people's nature. They want to solve a problem. It was Russia. And these photos kind of document what happened. This is a particularly dramatic photo because you see, him after he's been shot. This is after the gun has gone off.
Wow.
Yep. And so Ruby was arrested for this, and this is a really neat item. So this is, Lucas, read that if you can on the back.
October 1965 to Thomas E. Miller and family. May you always be content. Sincerely, Jack Ruby.
So this is, you're sitting in a jail cell. You just killed Lee Harvey Oswald. You got a lot of time on your hands. What are you going to do? You're going to do geometric artwork and make it look pretty.
That's what you're going to do, as one does.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I think these are really neat. This is the back with the handwriting. So it's artwork actually done. So we have an uninscribed Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth photo. Now, I love stories like this in my business. So the little boy in this picture, I knew as a dealer when I was a young dealer, when I was about Lucas's age. His name was Bill Boggs, and some 40 years later, his widow remembered me and decided to give these to me to auction off, and these will be in the auction. And I think they'll do very well. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, touching. You see them taking their time out of their busy schedule to pay attention to a young man, and then later they sign these photos. They were probably sent to him.
Very wholesome.
Yeah, it's wholesome. What I love about this one is it's actually a photo of Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth. Because if you look in the background, there's the unmistakable shape of the Bambino.
The wide home run hitting legend.
Yeah, yeah. And I think these will probably together bring over $10,000 in the auction.
Nice.
And they're coming up in the June auction.
And that's really your background, right? Authenticating
Yes.
items. You've done it for PSA and the biggest and best companies. So
Yep.
just to add that credibility, obviously.
And I'm getting around to teaching Lucas.
Yeah, of course.
Are you excited for
Gotta
that?
Follow in the footsteps. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. I'd
But
say.
for real, there's nobody more credible than John here. So
Well, I'll take that, but I'm sure there are people who are probably pretty talented, but I've really worked hard to create a reputation of really doing my homework as far as authenticity. Speaking of that, I know you just got to Washington. You must be very excited about it.
thank
Can't
you.
wait for it to come back. So this is, I actually wrote this paper called Washington, Not Washington. And I gave it to Mount Vernon, who has the biggest collection of George Washington letters and documents and everything. But I won't publish it.
Why is that?
There's a very good reason. So if I published me showing
Then people could fake so that, yeah,
exactly, so
it's
I'm
dangerous.
worried. So there's a fine line between educating the public.
And educating the criminal.
That's right.
Right,
And the criminal's always looking.
right.
And so in a lot of ways, I consider what I do, it's like an arms race.
Wow.
And so there was a really famous autograph expert, and he wrote most of the books, named Charles Hamilton. And Charles Hamilton was my mentor. And he was kind of like a hunched over old man. And when I first started going there, I was not that much older than Lucas. And he would be sitting in this chair that was very high up, and I'd have to sit in this couch that had broken springs. So I'd always be looking at him like this. He was a little guy, and I'm a big guy, but he always made sure that he was very high up and looking at
That's
me.
like a classic talk show host move, how they're always higher at the desk. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing, but I learned so much from him. He talked like this, and he'd say, "Reznikoff, what do you think of this Abraham Lincoln?" And I'd say, "Well, it looks good to me, Bud." That was his nickname. And he'd say, "Of course it looks good to you because you're an idiot." and then he would teach me what was wrong with it. It was hilarious, and I spent a lot of time with him.
One, to figuring out just right off the bat, apart from you just knowing,
Well, I mean, for me, I'd have to say, if I'm teaching it, it's different. But for me, here's how the process works. I've seen George Washington, I've probably seen 50,000 in my career, in my 42-year career, George Washington signatures. So what happens is I look at something, and my mind, it doesn't work for anything else, you know, I lose my keys 10 minutes ago, but I remember all the ones somewhere back in the recess of mind. So I'll look at this, and my mind scrolls. It scrolls through all the ones that I've looked at. And if there's something a little off, it kicks it out and it says, John, you better look at this a little more carefully.
Right.
That's the first thing, is having handled, the way to authenticate is having handled as many examples that are real and provably real as possible. Then we get into the physical aspects. And so
That's why experts are experts.
Yes. So the physical aspects, there's a lot of physical aspects. You know, you could look at the paper. You could look at the ink. Is the ink right? Is the paper right? And this happens to be a beautifully executed letter of George Washington, but not by George Washington. The forger's name was Robert Spring.
Wow.
And it's pretty amazing. And
how could you tell that that one's fake?
well, you know, it's interesting that you say. I mean, if you remember your Washington, and yours is an early one, the one that you got is 1760.
28, yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things, but size is very important. So the size of the autograph, and you can measure it, the slope. Lucas, can you grab that piece of glass right there? Of course. Yeah. So one of the things we use, this is a slope meter, is we could actually put this on the baseline of an autograph, and we could tell the angle of any given letter. And a writer will be mostly consistent with the angle of their letters. This is a very different one. So it's very different than yours, and this is a period. So Washington's
This is real.
Yeah.
This is real. This is a survey he did. Washington's signature, and this is very early. This is even earlier than the one that you got. It is from 1752.
I think I've seen a photo of this one before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's outstanding.
So around 1760, which is the date that Washington's signature changed very little from 1760 to 1799, the year he died. But before it was a little bit different. This is supposed to be in the period of when his handwriting did not change. And here, I could actually, and these are all done by Spring. This is Spring also.
Did he go to jail? What happened with him?
Yeah, a lot of these he did actually, and this is done by Cozy. So this is in a book. This is a facsimile, but this is more like what your George Washington looks
Right.
like. And look at the size of the G and the proportion of the bottom and the top. These are things we look at.
And these were all done in fountain pen at the time. So
Yes.
it's obviously the most important to know the time period and the pens that they were using and everything like that.
Absolutely. You know, if you see a George Washington and it's done in ballpoint pen, it ain't good. They didn't
That's
have
probably the easiest way to
Yeah.
tell. That looks, is that his presidential era
Well,
signature?
let's see. It would be, you could tell. So yeah, close. Yep.
Yeah, so like after his
Yep.
presidency.
Yep. And that's classically, and you know, it didn't change
I'm
much.
getting better at it, John.
There you go. Great Washington. This is, you know, he was a surveyor. He was nothing then when he wrote this.
That is insane.
Washington, you know, in this book. So this is, a piece, all in his hand, of his undelivered inaugural address. He had an inaugural address that he was going to give, and he decided to crumple it up.
What?
And these
From
pieces.
George Washington.
Yes.
So the very first inaugural address ever
Correct.
in American history.
Correct.
That he was supposed to give, never gave. That's that.
Right. In fact,
Did he ever give one at all?
he did, but very different than what was written. So this is a historian, Jared Sparks, and this comes with it. So this is really great as far as provenance. And I have to tell this to everybody. Provenance is not a place in Rhode Island. It's the history of an item. That's Providence.
Oh, right.
Anyway, so this is from 1850, Harvard University, Cambridge, May 16th, 1850. Dear Madam, I regret that it is not in my power to send you a more attractive specimen of Washington's handwriting. Many of his autograph letters have been in my possession, but the collectors long ago exhausted my stock. I enclose the best that I can furnish. Respectfully yours, Jared Sparks. So he doesn't even say what it's from, but because we have it recorded somewhere, we know.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is that it?
That's the piece, yes. In fact, so here's what's really cool. You have the letter of Jared Sparks, who was Washington's friend, and you could see here.
And that's all in Washington's hand.
Yeah.
Do you want to PSA slab it, or what's the?
Well,
thought
at some
process
point I
behind
may.
that?
So here's what's interesting. So even Sparks wrote on this piece, Washington's handwriting. And look, the handwriting's the same as in his letter, Washington's handwriting. So you
Wow.
could see. So it ties it all together.
Right, that was right after Lincoln's, or before Lincoln's presidency.
Yes.
Like 10 years before.
Yep, 10 years before, exactly.
When you're looking at the market today, and let's say you're just getting started, but you have a really, really, really big budget.
Yeah. Okay.
What sort of realm are you looking at? Are you looking for the best of the best? Because in sports cards, it's much more volatile than this sort of thing. But the top 5 to 10% hold up when everything else crashes. What are you looking at if you have $1 million budget to spend on either 100 items or one item? What direction are you going in?
Well, I mean, I think it's changing. So it used to be in our market, especially when things were raw, not in a slab. It used to be what drove the market was content. So let me illustrate that. You have a Kennedy letter that says, I can't make an appointment because I'm busy.
Right.
That's worth, let's say, $3,000. And then you have a Kennedy letter that says, these Cubans are driving me crazy. We're going to have to do something really severe. That's worth $100,000. So content used to be what drove the day. It still is what drives the day, but now we have a situation where people are looking for the slab and the condition.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe the condition is going to be very important in getting 10s and 9s in as far as an investment in driving the market. And of course now the ultimate would be is if you took an item that was a 10 in condition but also had great content.
Right.
So if you had $1 million budget, what I'm going to tell you, buy the best you could possibly afford.
One item over 10 items.
No. So the problem with spending $1 million on one item, and I see all these cards selling for $1 million, is you can't have diversity.
Right.
With $1 million.
It's impossible.
It's like, what investors do you know who invest in stocks that have one stock?
It's true.
And so I think, I mean, for $1 million, you could build a great collection of presidents. Great. And they could all be slabbed, and you could probably get all 9s and 10s, and you could probably even get some really fantastic content. But it's not just presidents. So what seems to be really hot in the market is science, especially.
Put me on the spot here. Newton.
And?
Einstein.
Correct.
Sorry.
Yeah, see, he's looking. So Newton and Einstein. Einstein is so hot right now.
There was just an E=mc² piece that sold for what, $2 million?
$1.2 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have in our next auction, we have a letter written by Albert Einstein to Herbert Hoover. It's one of 2 known Albert Einstein letters to a president.
Why is Einstein so much more valuable than Washington and Lincoln? Because I don't see Washington sell for $1 million every day.
Well, there are Washington letters that do sell for $1 million, like if you were talking about the Constitution or
The actual, one of the original 20 copies of the Declaration of
Yeah.
Independence.
he didn't. Most people think
Well, he didn't sign it.
He didn't sign it.
Right.
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 So there are Washington items that are. The thing with Einstein is, you know, you think of the word genius.
Right.
It's interchangeable with Einstein, and people want to collect that. And whether you love science or you're interested in history, I mean, you know, we don't have the nuclear bomb without Einstein, and a lot of things that go on today that are scientifically derived from his work, and Newton. So Newton and Einstein kind of rule the roost as far as scientific autographs. But you know, another big area, you just said it, Declaration of Independence. So
All the founding fathers,
Yeah.
Ben Franklin. And,
yeah, Franklin, Jefferson, Adams, and it doesn't have to be somebody who was a president. You know, these people who signed the Declaration are really important. To put together a set of Declaration signers, you need more than 1 million. The reason is there's one Declaration signer. His name is Button Gwinnett.
It's impossible.
He's tough. There's only 30 known examples. Most of them are in institutions. And he had a very interesting history. The Declaration signed in 1776, and within a year, he's shot in a duel.
In a duel.
In a duel.
Yeah, it shows you what time we were dealing with here.
Yeah, so he's hard to find. So him alone is like $500,000, just a clip signature.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Is
So,
that the most valuable signature money can buy?
It's one of them. It's one of the most desirable signatures in the entire hobby. I've never handled a Columbus. There's supposedly a couple that are out there that would be more, and also Shakespeare would be more.
Right. Shakespeare
Yeah.
is like a $7 million signature, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a couple million if one came up. But I haven't, my entire career, I've never seen one offered.
That's insane. What are the oldest signatures? Because signatures can only last so long unless kept in good condition, which
Right.
they had never been until the last 200 years.
Right.
Do we know what the oldest signature is known to man?
I mean, it would have to be, you know, Greek people,
They exist?
yeah, or even the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know? So are there signatures? No, but they're handwritten documents that are very important, and they're thousands of years old. But in, you know, what I would consider modern history, you know, from the 1400s up, you know, there are plenty of Isabel and Ferdinand
Right.
out there that you could buy, and they're related to America, so I think they're pretty cool, because without them, there's no Columbus who comes
Right.
knocking on our door.
And lots of, you know, kings and queens, because those were naturally kept well. And
Yep.
that's really like probably more than half the battle, right? Is
Yep.
what sort of condition were they kept in the 400, 500, 300, 200 years before anybody started collecting this kind of stuff.
That's true, yeah, and people, you know, they know a king or a queen is a very valuable autograph, and so they preserved it well, and it was kept in a book or wrapped up nicely, and so they're well preserved. You'd be surprised. I handle things all the time that are 500 years old that are mint.
Wow. Do you have an item that's ever come through here, or Lucas, you as well, that you've been incredibly proud of, that it's come through you?
The
and
Harvey
your
Oswald's
hands?
coat, I would say.
Yeah.
You were on Pawn Stars.
Yeah,
as well.
I was
You're
gonna say.
dripping, by the way.
Yeah, I
You
know.
wanna
I'm
wipe
like
down?
really sweating right now. Honestly,
It's hot
really,
today.
Yeah, it's very.
Why don't you
hot.
grab a towel, because you're on camera, and we'll.
No,
wipe.
no. I was gonna say I might need that.
Really like relics. I like things that presidents owned. And here it is, a cigar that was owned by John F. Kennedy.
So how does one prove something like that, like a cigar? How do you say that he owned it and you
The
didn't?
provenance, so
Right.
there are letters that show that it was gifted to him from the president of the Philippines, and we have a full documented record of it, and it's, you know, dead to rights. We know where it came from and its whole history, and it's authentic. It's real or not, and this is something that I sell. It's called the Optic, which is good for any hobby, and it's fiber optics. It was used to enhance the the infrared in tanks in Desert Storm, and I bought them as a military surplus. And there's no battery in it, but what it does is if you put it down on a document, it sucks the light in from the room, and it enlarges whatever you're looking at. And so this is, this machine, believe it or not, this is called a video spectral comparator. It costs more than a new Mercedes.
Really?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, this machine does a lot of things, and it's able to break down ink. And so here's a perfect example. Here's a card signed by Gerald Ford, and it's dated the day that he resigned. And this would be the day that Nixon resigned. And this would be worth a lot of money if it were authentic. But the signature is authentic, but watch what happens here. So if I press this button, it breaks down the ink, and you see how the ink is completely different?
Yep.
So that date was added later.
Wow.
And your eyes, it's hard for your eyes to see that. But the other thing that you could do, I'll show you this.
Should we test it? Should we write on a blank piece of paper with 2 different pens?
You can do that here.
Let's do it.
So these 2, and I'll circle it. See the difference?
Look at that.
Different ink. If I take that, it's not even a good way to do it. Anyway, maybe I can't see it because it's all crossed out, but if I pop it in here, look at that.
Whoa. It's pretty intense.
Yep.
Wow.
And then, so a lot of times things are written on a pad, or there's a paper underneath it. And okay, so I just wrote Babe Ruth on that. Now watch. This machine will also show impressions in paper.
Whoa. And that was just with pencil, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't really see that. You can't see that with your naked eye. You cannot see it. But this machine, and that's why it's so expensive, sees it.
I guess it should be worth more than a new Mercedes. Mercedes can't do that.
Right. And you have to put gas in Mercedes. This, I just plug it in.
Exactly. Skeptical when you opened it with that, but
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, it's really neat. Starting here.
Yeah, the real Abraham Lincoln.
So this is
One of one. I love
this is our receptionist, and he doesn't complain very much.
Nice.
And a couple of my mentors are here. So I told you about Charles Hamilton. This is a signed photo from Charles Hamilton, 1995. It's 26 years ago. And he was very kind. He wrote to John Reznikoff, a great autograph expert. I don't know how great I was in 1995, but now it's 25 years later. So one of my collections, which has gotten me a lot of fame, is hair locks of famous people. And some of them are displayed like this. It's kind of a really interesting addition.
Whose hair is that?
That's Samuel Smith, who wrote America, My Country 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty. Here, so this is, that's a lock of James Madison's hair, and his signature, right there. I'm only gonna get the really good ones for you, let's see. Here, come this way. Teddy Roosevelt's hair, Alice Roosevelt. Abolitionist John Brown, his hair. Napoleon, and this is a really interesting frame. So this has Napoleon, the person who defeated him, Wellington, and hair, this is the only animal hair that I have, hair from the horse of Wellington.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
Who was the horse of Wellington?
Copenhagen was the horse's name.
Wow.
And so this has a great story to it. This is Charles I, and he was beheaded. And somebody broke the tomb at one point.
Oh my God.
God.
And they wanted to see if the history was correct. Was he really beheaded? And there he was in two parts, top and bottom.
The rumor was true.
The rumor was true. Here's a letter of Richard Nixon on the wall. Everybody's favorite, Abraham Lincoln.
Good old Lincoln.
Yeah. And now this is really desirable because it's a naval commission. And you could tell by all the allegorical figures here.
What was it for?
So it's for this guy, William Plant, nominated and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, I do appoint him Assistant Surgeon in the Navy.
Wow, in 1862, so his first term.
Yep. And that's really cool. Let's see.
Very cool. Love Lincoln. The GOAT.
This is the Indian Red Jacket, who was important during the Revolutionary War.
I'm trying to think of what else.
Yeah, there's not that much.
We still have a lot more we're putting up too.
I believe it. What's this piece of plane?
That's a piece of the Wright brothers plane, but not the original plane. So that's a later plane and a piece of the fabric of the plane. And again, as I said, I love relics, so anything like that just speaks to me.
Beginning of flight. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. Let me see if I have that. Do you have that Jefferson in here, or they already packed it up?
Which one?
Here. So this is that beautiful Washington, owned by none other than Buster.
Thank you.
And it found a good home. I really like it when my autographs find a good home.
I appreciate
It's
that.
important to me.
What I was so excited about with this one was how big the signature was.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And if you remember the signatures I showed you, this follows, the signatures that he's known for that were consistent throughout his life.
And also, what I think about now is how good something will look in a slab.
Exactly. And actually, I'm sending this to be slab because it's so beautiful. But here's the most famous signature in history. John Hancock.
The largest on the Declaration of
Yep.
Independence, right?
Yep.
Why did he sign so big?
Do you know the answer to that?
Because it was like, wasn't it like an FU to like the French or something like that?
It's rumored. Here, come in here because I don't want anybody to hear me swearing. Because you've never heard that, right, Robin?
No, I've never heard that.
We are all model employees.
So it's rumored that Hancock signed really big, bigger than everybody else, and said, I want that fat fuck George III to make sure he sees my signature.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's really great, yeah.
Wow. Well, shoot, the only thing left, I guess, is where can people find you best, and where can they buy stuff from you, or can they buy stuff from you?
They absolutely can buy stuff from me. I am really accessible. I love speaking to the public and talking to them and helping to guide them. universityarchives.com, 203-454-0111. You're gonna, if you want to get to me, you will get to me. If you want to talk to me, I really try to speak to anybody who really wants to talk to me. It's important. I don't hide. I love this stuff and I have passion for it, so give me a call.
And we also have auctions frequently on Invaluable and Live Auctioneers too. So.
Yeah, just about every month.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Boom. We'll link everything below, but
Yeah.
thank you guys so much for having me, and we'll have to do this again sometime
Thanks
soon.
for having me.
You got
Appreciate
it.
it.
Always.
Yep.
Cool. That's a wrap.